Good evening. Glad everybody can be here. Hey, grab your pen and paper because we're going to learn some things about private membership associations. And Bryan Parker is going to teach us everything he knows. Go for it. Let's do this. Welcome.
Well, hey, it's great to be here. I don't know if I am going to be able to teach you everything I know. This is quite an extensive topic. I'm just going to, I think, basically try and hit the highlights on it. What do we have, like an hour?
We have about 35 minutes, I think.
Okay.
So we'll just
All
have
right.
to cut to the chase.
All right. Yep. Let me see if I can glide through this because I'm sure there's going to be some questions or something like that that you or somebody else that's with us might have, and that way I can answer those as well. So I want to allot for a little bit of time for that. So let me get right to it. You know, when I first started researching things, just to give everybody a little background, I was looking at a lot of the same little rabbit holes everybody else stumbles down. Okay. And of course, one of the biggest, I think, rabbit holes is the whole patriot movement. But looking at that from an overview, it seemed like these patriots were either ending up dead on the side of the road or in prison, dying in prison. And I didn't really see a whole lot of headway being made there. And so I kind of got away from listening to whether you want to call them the gurus or whatever. And I started trying to find like maybe some back doors where I could listen to what attorneys were saying, what judges had to say, and different things like that. Even, you know, like even ex-CIA agents, if there is such a thing as an ex-CIA agent, okay? You get a lot of little hints and clues from them. And at the same time, I would just have like random thoughts come in my mind. And so I would go to the Great Oracle. I would go to Google and I would put in my random thought. And on this day, and this was about 5, maybe 6 years ago, I had the thought of what is an attorney's best kept secret? So I typed in attorney's best kept secret, and only one viable link really popped up. And it was actually a link to a video called The Best Kept Secret by Carl Dahlstrom. And what this was regarding was private associations or private membership associations. Personally, I kind of think private membership association is kind of redundant. They're actually just private associations, okay? And in researching that and listening to what he was talking about, because he was coming from things from a medical point of view. And we notice a lot of like chiropractors and different health practitioners make use of private associations today. It's probably one of the more obvious popular areas we see it at. But at the same time, you think of homeowners association. A homeowners association is another form of private association. And within a private association, what you are doing is you are setting aside any rights or benefits you think you might have by a state constitution, and you're accepting the rules and regulations of this private association. So this can be a double-edged sword. One place where this can be seen as being somewhat negative would be, say, Department of Motor Vehicles, because when you sign on the dotted line with them, you're setting aside any so-called thoughts of right to travel or things like that, and you're accepting their rules and regulations instead. That's why whenever there's traffic situations, for instance, with court, you can't come in and try and claim constitution this or that. The judge will freaking shut you down immediately. And the reason why is because you have agreed to a different set of rules and regulations. And the Supreme Court has ruled many times that this is perfectly okay. Even John Marshall, back in like the 40s, said the same thing. He ruled that this is perfectly okay. And John Marshall is the chief judge for the Supreme Court at that time that actually created the judicial system that we see today. He's referred to often as the father of today's judicial system. Okay, so private membership associations. One of the things, and I noticed after I started posting about this and showing it, uh, a few months into it,
Mhm.
all of a sudden I started seeing different people start talking about this, and different organizations were trying to offer this for their little groups or whatever. And I saw some places that were charging $10, $20, $30 a month. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Because what they were doing was really taking advantage of other people's lack of knowledge regarding what a private association is and how you organize and run one and establish it. Okay. So that's what we're going to cover tonight, because that's really, I think, people's first question is, okay, how do you do it? And so
Mhm.
I have um, 2 steps, okay, for doing it. This is what I'm going to outline. And in these 2 steps, the first step has 6 little steps under it, okay? But your first step is you are creating the body of the association, which is what these 6 things underneath it are going to be. It's going to be the body of it, all right? And in the body of this association, number 1, you're going to create a name, okay? Say, and here's an example of how this can be used. That would be very beneficial to people this past year and a half. Say you own a hair salon and you want to make it a private salon,
Mhm.
private association.
Mhm.
So you just have members for it, right? And so the name of your salon can be, Julie's Cuts, PA, private association. So you're going to create the name. That's number 1. Number 2, you're going to establish the intent of the association. Okay. And so for your intent, well, what is it? Well, it's going to be Julie's Cuts, for instance. So what is it? You are following your contractual obligation to supply 3 haircuts per month to a member. Or say maybe you've got another package for them, you're supplying 8 haircuts per month for a member's family. Okay. That's just a very blanket explanation of that. Number 3, it's going to have its own bylaws set up. And these bylaws will
Mhm.
relate to these 6 things in this body, okay? And one of the basic bylaws that can be set up is, say, for instance, for your meetings, you're going to follow Robert's Rules of Order, okay? That's something that can be done there.
Mhm.
Number 4,
Mhm.
because this is an organization, it's an association, that means it's going to have officers. So you're going to need to select officers. You're going to have a chairman, and these officers can rotate in and out yearly if you want, every 6 months if you want. This really doesn't have to be a big task. And I'll show you how you can simplify it in a minute. But you're going to set up a chairman that kind of runs things, a secretary who keeps notes, keeps records, and then you're gonna have a treasurer that keeps an eye on the money coming in and out, where it's coming from, what it's being used for. And you need to remember at the same time, people are gonna wonder about tax liability. This is a private agreement among people. And the strength of this lays really at the constitutional level. That's where it's defended at by the Supreme Court. Uh, it's in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Um, I see different people try and show things constitutionally sometimes, and a good way to remember things is the word ask, A-S-C, Article, Section, Clause. Okay, so Article 1,
Mhm.
Section 10, Clause 1 says that no state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. Okay, so that means if I have a contract with Julie that she's going to cut my hair, guess what? Another entity can't step in and say, no, she's not allowed to. There's only one way they could do that, is if she's holding license from that other entity. Guess what? With a private association, you're stepping away from licensing, you're stepping away from most regulations, you're getting away from these little permits and things, because this is just contractual between the two of us. We're omitting a third party. And this is a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
And it's
Like the
done more than,
state, you mean? State
yes,
licensing,
exactly.
the
All right,
cosmetology.
yeah.
Get rid of it.
Number 5 of what you're going to do is you're going to set up regular meetings. And this is where I'm going to show you how simple this can be. You can have in your bylaws that you're going to have a regular meeting the first Monday of every month. Okay. Does everybody have to
Okay.
come together and meet somewhere? No, they don't. You can do something as simple as just saying, we're going to meet on the phone and you come
A
together.
Facebook group.
Yes, even something like that. Any way you want it, because why? You can do it any way you want it because this is privately between people. Okay. Let me see if I can scroll here so I can show these steps while I'm talking about it. I guess that would make sense, wouldn't it? And people can read this article. It's posted on my WordPress, Bryan Parker, Tactical Sovereignty. You can also find it on my fake book group or just my regular fake book page. Anyway, so with these meetings, like I said, they can even just be done over the phone and they can last 5 minutes. You come together, our members here that are required. Yes, the members are here. Is there any new business? No, there's no new business. Are we going to have a meeting next month? Yes, we are. It's going to be at such and such a time, such and such a date. Motion to adjourn, motion recognized. See you all next month. And you just make a note of that meeting. It can be that simple, unless you do have some things that you need to go over.
Okay.
And the secretary at the same time is going to be keeping records of what's going on regarding these meetings. Now, we're going to move to number 2. Let me see where I've got it listed at here. I've got some examples of people who have done this. I'll just leave it right here.
It could almost be like what we're doing right now, having a little Facebook message.
Exactly.
And then having it recorded.
Exactly. So those were the 6 steps underneath, basically step 1. Step 2 is a little more simple. What you're going to do is you're going to go to a publication of record, which it depends on your state. Some states require X amount of subscribers, or I know Florida, I believe, is 10% of the population needs to be able to see your stuff online or purchase it at a newsstand. That's the regulation for Florida right now. They're going to be, I think, broadening it if they haven't done so already under bill number 35, if I recall correctly. But what you're going to do is you're going to publish the intent. I, Julie, am going to be opening a association called Julie's Cuts, you know, plain and simple, keeping it basic, and you're just publishing this intent. It's a notice of intent into the business section. And generally it has to be published for 2 consecutive publishings. If a publication only publishes once a week, then it's being done 2 weeks in a row. If a publication publishes every day, then it's 2 days in a row. Okay. And then after those 2 consecutive publishings are done, then you're going to get from the newspaper an affidavit of publication. And that might, who knows, cost you 20, 30 bucks. But right there, that is going to be your evidence of the creation of your association. So if somebody wants to see proof that this association exists, right there on that document, that's where you gave notice to everybody and you've moved forward with it. And that's your affidavit of publication. And that's generally really the only evidence you're going to need for anybody. They don't have to go in and see the records that the secretary is keeping. They cannot come in and ask to see the records that the treasurer is keeping, because these are all private. All right. I remember a few years ago, on a much bigger scale. And Rand Paul talked about it a lot, or not Rand Paul, but his father talked about a lot, and that was auditing the Fed. And the Fed came back with a reply and said, we don't have to answer to you or to anyone else because we're not a subsidiary of government. We are private. All right. Same exact situation. And I remembered, when I was studying these things regarding private associations, reading a work by Carol Quigley where he was talking about how things would run in the future. And he said in the future, things would run by rings within rings, or he called them circles within circles. And he said it didn't matter if one of those circles got taken down because the members of that circle were going to be members of other circles as well. And that didn't quite click in my head when I read that a few years ago. So I just kind of stuck it away in the back of my mind. And when I started researching and learning about how private associations operate, I remembered that statement. And I was like, holy crap, these are the circles within circles, or rings within rings that Carol Quigley was talking about. And and as soon as that dawned on me, I started going out and doing some more research. And I looked at the Defense Attorneys Association. Huh? Guess what? It's a private association. Prosecutors Association, same thing. There's the Judges Association. There is the County Commissioners Association. People think that your county commissioners are only really just concerned about taking care of your county and what's good for your county. No, because they are a member of a larger association, which is located like a block and a half away from the White House. All right. So these are the things that Carol Quigley was talking about what was going to be running the world. And it's kind of right here in front of our face. And somehow we've missed it, or a lot of people have. But it's time that I think we start recognizing this and saying, you know what? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If this is how you guys are operating and running everything, then guess what? This is how we are going to operate as well and start running our lives. Because you can't tell us we can't do it if it's working perfectly for you. And so we just start doing the same thing. I remember I was going to add one thing. I remember here about a year ago when a lot of things were shut down here in Florida, restaurants and stuff. I had a guy that lived a couple doors down from me. He was a cook. He was never out of work. He was working the whole time. Why? Because the place he worked at was part of an association where they were required to at least afford 2 meals a day to any member of that association. So he never missed a day of work. So anyway, go ahead, dear.
Okay, so when I did go to the bank to try to change the name of my business, they said I needed to put an ad in the paper and have a doing business as name. When I called the paper, she says I needed to go to the county to apply for a business license or something like that, or register or something. And I was like, I don't want to read just anything. I don't want to give anything to the king. So I would record, I'd record, but I just didn't know the step on where do you start with the newspaper ad? Because they might say in my newspaper, you have to go to the county and register a name for your business or something. They might say that. Because that's what they said before.
No, they won't, because number one, you are not providing a notice of opening a business. You're providing a notice of opening an association. And so what you were looking at in your situation was a DBA, doing business as, which is also required to be put in the newspaper. But though you have to go, for instance, it's the Secretary of State that takes care of that. And so you go to their site and you go and you put in the information for setting up your DBA. And I did mine, and I did it under being unincorporated, which gets listed in a totally different section than all the other businesses do. So yeah, that was a DBA situation. That wasn't opening an association.
So if somebody wants to change the name of their business, then they'd have to do the doing business as, right?
If it's a business, yeah. If it's a business. Now, if it's an association and you want to change names, you can have an allowance for that in the bylaws of your association. And you know what? It doesn't matter to anybody what you are doing within that association because it's being done privately. It's private contract between men and women, and no state can impair the obligation of a contract.
Hey, Brian, can I ask a dark question here?
Sure.
So what about if people want to get together and form, say, a group that wants to have sex with children? Do they just have a little PMA and they can bring their kids in and exchange and be totally not have to worry about the law?
That is a very good question. I'm glad you asked that because they have covered that in the Supreme Court. In fact, things like that were covered by John Marshall. Because PMAs, yeah, you can do kind of whatever you want, but you are still really under like natural law, which is do no harm. Okay.
Okay.
Which means no, you could not set up a pedophile ring underneath the PMA. It has been tried. Don't think it hasn't. Yeah, it has been tried. I think people would probably know of the MAMBLA or NAMBLA Association. I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, you can do things as long as you're not harming people. You can't set up an association of bungee jumpers where you are all jumping off a 1,000-foot cliff with a 1,500-foot rope. Yeah, no, that would be against natural law. That would be against doing no harm, and so that wouldn't float.
Well, what law enforcement agency would step in and say, hey, this is against natural law? You can't do that.
What would end up happening is like pretty much with anything else. A complaint would be lodged with the judiciary. A judge would take a look at it, or a state attorney would look at it, and then they would sign off on a warrant. I think somebody saw, if you were looking when I was scrolling, there was a situation I had about a year, well, not a year and a half, it's more like 3 years ago. And I've since met other people who've done the same thing. But a friend of mine up in a northern state who came to me and said, Brian, he says, you know, I have this decent little poker game at my house all the time. He says, I'm afraid that at some point, some wife is going to get upset because the husband lost the mortgage money or the grocery money and turn us in. And I said, no problem. You want to set things up as a private association. He went and did that. Sure enough, it wasn't like a month and a half later. They got a knock on the door one evening, and it was the police. And he said, you know, I'm sorry, this is a private association. What we're doing poker training in here for dealers and that kind of stuff. So if you can go back to the judge and he'll sign off on a warrant for a private association, we have no problem opening our door for you. They left, they never came back.
Okay. So how about Costco? I've been a Costco member and I've never been invited to a meeting.
Well, they've got their own meetings among their stakeholders. And, you know, I think it's interesting the past year, you know, if people notice so many businesses being shut down and things like that, I started laughing to myself when I was watching it, because one of the things you didn't really see get shut down were big grocery stores, you know, Winn-Dixie or Piggly Wiggly or Publix or whatever. And I kind of laughed to myself because I knew the reason why you didn't see those stores get shut down. It wasn't just because they were considered an essential service, because there was another way for people to get an essential service for that. You know, they could have ordered online. They could have picked stuff up at the door of the stores. The stores were starting to offer that. Okay. But no, that wasn't mandated. Why not? The reason why was because if they had mandated that to the regular stores, the regular grocery stores, there's a little problem. We've got a couple stores out there called Sam's Club and Costco, like you were talking about. What are those? Those are private associations. And they are under obligation to supply necessary items to their members. And so if the state had done that, they wouldn't have been able to touch Costco and Sam's, and the whole cover on private associations would have been blown for those that were really paying attention.
Right.
May I?
We have 7 minutes left. Go ahead, Malachi.
Hi, Brian. My question is, when you set up your PMA, should you get a 501, a 508 C1A EIN, or should you create a CPN to do banking with?
Right. Yeah, you can handle the banking affairs. There's a couple different ways of doing that. You can
Okay.
have, say, like a second organization. So you're providing like an arm's length, difference between the parties. You can set up a separate association that takes care of the banking. CPN is a credit privacy number. Those are generally for individuals. Something like that could be used. Yeah. And I was listening actually a few days ago to a friend of mine who was talking about associations among his little association. And they were talking about how they were going to set up a 508 through the IRS. And that's a big no-no. Absolutely not. Because this is private. And if your association goes and starts contracting with another entity like the IRS, and I don't even care if it's 508, if you look at a charter for anybody that's a 508, it will say that that organization is organized as a 508 under the IRS. Are you supposed to be under the IRS? No, we are supposed to be private.
Okay, so again, so what do you use? I'm still a little confused.
Well, like I said, you can use a secondary organization that takes care of the finances for your
Okay.
association. You know what I mean? To me, that's the best way of doing it.
Okay, and that one you can get it through EIN through the IRS.
If you feel the need to, yeah, but anybody can have a bank account, and you can name a bank account anything. I remember a number of years ago, I realized that the landlord that I had wasn't paying the mortgage. And so I foresaw the time that there was going to be an eviction probably. So what I did is I went to the bank and I opened up an account, and I named it the address of where I lived. We'll call it 123 Maple Street. I opened an account, it was an escrow account, and I operated everything with that escrow account. That's where I paid my rent to. And I sent him a notice that I knew that there was a possible upcoming foreclosure and that the money was being put into escrow in this account called 123 Maple Street. And when I was satisfied that there wasn't going to be any problems, those funds would be released to him. And nothing ever came from him. He never said a word. And 7 or 8 months later, I took those funds, pulled them together, and used them as part of a down payment for a house. All right. That's just one example of something you can do. But you can open up a bank account like that for any like little association. Businesses are different though.
Okay, but how do you open up a bank account with like 123 Main Street, for example?
I went in and told the clerk, sat down, told the clerk what my intention was, what I want to do, and she said no problem and set it up.
Okay. So you didn't have like a trust created for it?
PMA.
No, that wasn't a separate PMA or anything like that. No, I'm just saying you can set up accounts under different things. You just don't want to use that word business, because when you use that word business, now you're falling under Title 31, the codes under that, which administrate banking.
Okay,
Gotcha.
thank you.
We have 2 minutes left. If there's anything you wanted to leave us with, this would be the time.
Well, I think this is really the time that an age where we need to stop operating the way we've always been shown all our life. Because people say, well, how do you do it? Well, this is what you do. Why? I always used to get in trouble at home because I asked why when I was a kid. And I think we need to start asking that question a lot more often. And because the answer we normally get is, well, that's just because of the way everybody does it. Well, you know what? Everybody around me are the peasants. I don't want to operate like a peasant anymore. I want to start operating in my own level of sovereignty and taking care of my life the way it's supposed to be done. Because do you think that the elite or the 3% or whatever, do you think they're operating their finances and that their life is structured like ours is? Absolutely not. It's structured totally different. And so we need to start looking into how to structure our life accordingly where there is protections, because we want to protect ourselves and our assets. And that's
Thank
pretty
you
much
so
it.
much, Brian, for being with us, and telling us that great information. I was just wondering, do we need to notify our clients or the people that we're doing, the private membership? Do we need to give them something to sign or read? As the
Yeah,
last
absolutely.
question there.
Absolutely. The people you're contracting with need to know this is a private association. This is why it's a private association. And these are the benefits you will get by it being a private association, rather than a regular standalone business.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate everybody here.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. And any questions, feel free to field them to me. I can send you this article. It has a bunch of links in it that will give you way more detailed questions that you might have regarding setting this up.
Thank you. We'll be
Thank you
looking
so
forward to
much.
seeing you on Tactical Sovereignty Administration State. Thank
Right.
you guys for being here.
Good night, guys.
Good night.